Welcome back to Sustainability and Supply Chain Live London, and delighted now to be joined by Clare Lissaman, who's head of Oxfam Advisory Services. Welcome.
Hello, thank you.
Now, Clare, I wondered if, for our viewers, if you could maybe just introduce yourself and your role.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for inviting me to be here at Procurement Live. It's been a great day so far. I'm Clare Lissaman. I'm the head of Oxfam Advisory Services. I think many of your viewers will know Oxfam. We're a global non-governmental organisation founded 80 years ago this month. But the fact that we have advisory services working with business on human rights impacts in their supply chains is possibly a bit newer. We're part of Oxfam in the UK. And we do provide a business service to businesses, really, I would say, helping companies to implement all the kind of things we as Oxfam, as a campaigning research policy body, have been saying to companies. It'd be great if you could do this. We think you as businesses should operate like this and have this positive human rights impact. We now provide that practical, pragmatic help to help companies look through their supply chains, their own operations, and say, how can we do things that are better for people?
And does Oxfam Advisory Service have a typical kind of client?
Oh, good question. We really work more across issues than sectors. So we'll work particularly, we'll work across the gamut of human rights, due diligence, labour rights. We work particularly on living wage, living income, issues around purchasing practices and how they work on impact, and around gender, and a lot of work on worker voice. So that might be things like grievance mechanisms and how you can implement them as part of your human rights due diligence. In terms of sectors, kind of aligned with where Oxfam's been working in recent years. We do a lot of work in with food and beverage companies, with retail, particularly grocery and fashion, and also FMCG. But we could work across sector.
So we've just been involved in a panel discussion on ESG. Had a senior person from Accenture there as well, and covered a lot of ground. But what were sort of for you one of the main points from that?
Yeah, it was such an interesting panel, because I think we were talking about ESG and companies doing it, and all the panelists, and I think the audience was saying, yeah, this is what we have to do now. It's just part of doing business. Someone had that statistic that for global CEOs, it's number 8 on their list of priorities at the moment, and rising up. And I think 15 years ago, we were like banging on the door and saying, come on, companies, you need to be thinking about environmental, thinking about social. And people were going, that's not core business, that's something, that's charity or CSR or helping. So that was a really, I think, really inspiring part of the panel and of the day, that people are seeing that it's a business critical to be working on these areas.
And ESG, I guess everybody sort of focuses on the E element of that. What about the social perspective? How do you help your customers, take action around the social portion of ESG?
Yeah, so I think I'm certainly hearing lots about environmental and carbon and science-based targets and all that stuff, and there's a rate, and that's very quantifiable. I think that social side of ESG, I wouldn't say it entirely gets missed, but it can sometimes feel a bit quieter in these conversations we have. And for us, obviously, we're Oxfam, we're about a radically better world, improving impact on people. And for our customers, for our clients, for the companies we work with, they're going, how do we do this in a really practical way? We can set up commitments to say we want to embed human rights, we want to have living wage, but what does it actually mean to do that? So we will work with them on reviewing policies, because things start with policy, saying where are their gaps, and we take, as Oxfam, a worker-centric, participatory, gender lens approach to even how we approach the question. I think that's what makes us a little bit different sometimes. But we'll work with them. We've worked with a client on developing a toolkit so they can do site-level grievance mechanisms across their global supply chain. And then we'll work with implementing that, providing capacity to their teams to say, this is how you might start thinking about this, working and doing it. We worked with the International Coffee Organization on a gender transformative tracker tool. So starting thinking in coffee, that sounds very NGO-y, doesn't it? But how do you really look at the livelihood impact on women? And if you start thinking about that very specifically, you start having really positive impact. That's also good for business, because you get people.
And maybe moving on to the G of ESG, which can also be something that is less discussed. I mean, it used to be that in the past, investors would be looking at governance mainly from a shareholder's interest perspective. How has governance broadened, would you say, over recent years? What sort of elements has it taken on that maybe it didn't have before?
Yeah, I mean, I think things like the Modern Slavery Act, I suppose,
Yeah.
if that falls into that thing, regulatory stuff, the upcoming mandatory human rights due diligence legislation, and legal liability and legal responsibility now has pushed it up the agenda of boards and of investors that will be looking at that. So I suppose that how you think about your business and where it will be in 10, 15, 30 years time, and your responsibility is shifting and changing. I can see that. I don't know if you want to unpack that a bit.
Yeah,
Or...
sure. Okay. Clare Lissaman, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you.